Hi, and welcome to episode 10 of the Mouthwash Talk Show. And man, a lot can happen in a week. So I'm going to go over some of the new ground rules. And as you can see, we had a new entrance to our new intro to the show. And things change. So, and we also have a new guest. And I'm really excited about our show tonight because we're going to talk about separation of church and state with Mark Small on the left of the GOP and Micah Beckwith, which is on the right of the GOP. And that's going to be awesome. So let's go over a little bit of the ground rules right now. So let's look at the comments. Oh, look at this. We already got a fan. Mike has already got a fan here. This is awesome.
I know Aubrey.
Yeah. Aubrey. So that's great. And this is how it works. So if you are live on Facebook, which we appreciate you tuning in to this awesome show, that you can put your comment in the live feed, and I may just do like this, like Thomas, and put you on there. Keep that in mind. And then also another announcement we have, due to the fact that Jacob lives by Chicago and he's on Central Time, and Lucy has a commitment at 8. We're going to start in the summer months at least, as we are going to go at 9 o'clock. So next week's show will be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that will help some of us out that are trying to get things together. So look at this. Is this going to be a Micah fan club here? Hey, Mark, where's your people? Come on. So without any further ado, I think that we're ready to get this thing going. How this is going to work tonight is we're going to have a spicy debate here between Micah and Mark about separation of church and state. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to bring on Lucy and Jacob, and they're going to ask a question or two, and then feel free to ask questions in the chat for our audience. And then we're going to bid them adieu, and then we're going to talk a little bit more. So this may go a little longer than an hour. I hope it does, because that means it was a good discussion. And so let's get to it. We always let the left person go first, Mike, because, they don't, got a special.
I'll go ahead and defer. I'll be glad to defer.
All right, Micah, give us a quick elevators of your what you're about, baby.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, John. It's good to be on. I love the show. Love what you're doing. I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for probably over 15 years now. I'm also I ran for Congress with Mark and I. We were in the GOP 5th District congressional race in 2020. And so we been very involved in politics. One of my passions is to really get the church to engage in government and to get the people of the Christian movement to really step up and get off the bench and start engaging in the government, because I know when good people who are guided by solid ethics and morals that our founders knew to be true, when they get engaged, we have a good government that actually protects the liberties and freedoms of the people, all religions. But it only comes when we have those foundations of the Christian faith. That we see that in the writings of the founders all over the place. And so I'm looking forward to talking about that today, because there is a push right now to cancel Christianity in our culture. Even what's happening with the Hamilton Southeastern schools right now, they're celebrating Ramadan, they're celebrating everything but Christianity. They're making sure that Christianity gets knocked off of whatever place that it is, and they're doing it intentionally. And it's coming from the left. It's coming from people who hate God, who hate the idea of a higher being, and so that's really what's happening in our culture, and it's detrimental. It doesn't mean you have to worship God, but it means that if you kick out the foundations of our culture is going to crumble, and we're seeing that more and more every day. So looking forward to this discussion. It's going to be a good debate.
Well, I think Mark was smart to let you go first, because I'm pretty sure he's going to have something different to say about that. Go ahead, Mark. Tell us about Mark, didn't you have a case before the Supreme Court? I just want to try to build him up a little bit here. Did you have a case?
I've had some cases before the Supreme Court and other courts, but in terms of religious liberties and stuff, first of all, saying that everybody's wanting to cancel out Christianity right now because it's Ramadan. Christianity has a real good run on a whole bunch of other holidays. And when Micah says that
HSC didn't celebrate Christmas or Easter.
Micah,
so that's not what I said. Yep. So
Mike,
All right, yeah,
Micah,
let's
I did
let
not
the
interrupt.
other guy talk and go from there.
Thank you. When all people of all religions can worship, it's when you say it's the foundations of the Christian faith enable it, that means that there's kind of a twist one way, and that means that the Christian faith is going to be controlling things. When we look back at the Reformation, for example, we had a battle between two parts of Christianity, and a whole bunch of people were killed. And that's why when the framers of the Constitution met to go and write the Constitution, they were very conscious of the fact that they wanted to keep religion out of government. And so that's what they did. That's why there is no professing of an oath to God for any office. That's why God isn't mentioned in the main Constitution itself. Alexander Hamilton, when he was asked about it, said, "We forgot." The framers were primarily either deists, Christian deists, or Orthodox Christians. But they were very, very careful to avoid religion in government. Now, two things on that. One, the framers only represented 7 to 8% of the population, white male landowners. Not counted in that are people who were slaves, the indigenous peoples who had many religions. Half the country, women weren't counted. A lot of them were Christian, of course, but that's what was omitted. And then when you look at what happens when you have religion in government, inevitably, as history teaches us, inevitably somebody will speak for God. And that means they're going to tell people what God says, and their religion then will run things. And that's why we have separation of church and state. Micah, you can worship as you wish. Everyone can. And you can practice your principles and vote as you wish. But putting religion into the government and breaking down the wall between church and state is not the way to do it.
So let me ask you a question, Mark, if I can, to piggyback off of that. If there is no religion, we are completely secular government, which our founders were not trying to create a secular government, but if we go that direction, we go and create a secular government, who gets to decide morality? Because you can obviously see morals, they go different directions based on the people. If you're in Iran, you're going to get your head cut off if you're a homosexual. And that's morally just to the Ayatollah. That's morally just to them. And then you move over to other nations and you're going to see morality dictating policy. So if we are a secular nation, somebody somewhere has to say absolute truth comes from something. And so because if there's no absolute truth, then anybody can do whatever they want to do. And our laws are going to, well, why is it wrong to kill somebody? If you don't have the Christian foundations and principles of our nation, where do the laws of goodness and justice come from?
Okay, you have three different questions in there. The first one was, how do we make, I'll just kind of group them. Where do we get morality in that way? Okay. Each person has a moral basis in their own life. They make that decision. Religion is an individual choice. Morality is something we learn as individuals. You don't have to be Christian to be moral. I watched your video where you said, sorry, but if you're an agnostic or a Hindu or a Muslim, you really can't be moral. You have to be Christian. You have to have a foundation in the scriptures. You said you have to have a foundation of morality in the scriptures. That was in your.
I said true morality comes from the foundations of the scriptures.
Yeah, go ahead, Micah. Go ahead and explain that. I want to know.
Yeah, no, I said true morality, goodness, wholesome justice comes from the scriptures. It's always come from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He set up long ago the truth of justice and morality, which is what our framers intended for. And, I have a quote right here from Noah Webster. He was the father of the American education system. He says this: no truth is more evident to my mind than that the Christian religion must be the basis for any government intended to secure the rights and privileges of a free people. So it's not to say people can't worship. I'm going to fight for everybody's right to worship however they choose, whether you're Christian, Hindu, Muslim, atheist, whatever you want to worship, you have a right to do that here. What I'm saying is the God of Christianity gives us the foundations of freedom. The freedom comes from the Judeo-Christian principles, and that's what our founders knew to be true. So if we get rid of the foundations of Christian principles in our nation, well, guess what's going to happen? Freedom and liberty will go to the wayside as well. It will happen without a doubt, because you kick God out. Well, then people with their own morality. I mean, I'm sorry, Mark, I don't trust the morals of our politicians to go to Washington and to really do things that are morally and ethically just on either side of the aisle. I don't want that. I don't want their morals guiding us. I want a foundation that is rooted in absolute truth, and that comes from the Judeo-Christian principles.
Okay, except there is no absolute truth, like you say.
But that is an absolute. That is an absolute truth.
Wait, no.
That is an absolute truth.
Like, we breathe oxygen, we see the sky, but saying what we are here for is an absolute truth is not really accurate. That's your belief, okay? And I can have a moral foundation for what I believe, and I believe that we shouldn't kill each other because over the millennia, when people have existed, we've learned that it's best. Other religions that predate Christianity and Judeo-Christianity say things like the Golden Rule. That's adopted in other religions. When you say that the morals came from the God of Abraham and Moses, okay, that's the God of the covenant. That includes Islam. So that's part of that morality, that you can believe that. When you say both sides of the aisle, it's like a by thing, two things. No, there are many views of things. There are many religions. There are tens of thousands of religions right now. There have been millions of religions, because everybody has tried to explain why we are here in the universe. And no religion should be part of government to dictate how people make that determination. And the morality that people act upon and how they vote is a personal thing. And that's why we have, if you look at our laws, there's a law against murder. That is something that's fairly universal.
Where'd it come from?
It came from human experience.
I disagree with that. I think by nature, humans will do things that are wicked if they aren't pointed to truth. I think by nature, we are all fallen and we'll give ourselves over to wickedness. And there has to be an absolute truth. And when you say there is no absolute truth, well, that statement in itself is an absolute truth. And so there has, at some point, we're going to have to agree on absolute truth.
No, when I was talking about absolute truth, when you said there's no absolute truth, I was interpreting that as a universal thing. And when I said, well, we can agree that there's oxygen, we can agree that there's the sky, those are truths. So yes, there are individual statements that are absolute truths. When you talk about the negative nature of human beings, when you read Lord of the Flies, and these kids are isolated on an island, and William Golding's novel is brilliant, and it describes how these kids really brutalize each other. Well, about 30 years ago, there were kids who actually crashed on an island, and for about a year and a half or 2 years had to subsist on their own. They didn't break down like that. They were able to cooperate with each other. They had regular times when they would have dinner. They had customs they developed with one another, and they didn't go into chaos. They didn't start killing each other or hurting each other. So that is, and the law against murder actually did arise, because actually a lot of these things predate Christianity and Judeo-Christianity, Micah, because the human race has existed, Homo sapiens has, for about 1 million years from East Africa. And when you narrow it down, and you have that right, but when you impose that on other people, then that kind of narrows down our focus of how we've existed. And I'm reacting to those things off the bottom of the screen. I hope that's okay.
Well, I want to hit on something you said earlier. You said that nowhere is, God, or I can't remember how you said it, Mark, but nowhere is God mentioned in, or Christianity mentioned in the Constitution. But you can't take the Constitution without looking at the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence, in the first 45 words, we see that as a nation, we are going to adhere to the laws, the natural law, the common law that the Creator has established, the Creator. And these men knew that Creator to be the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the Christian foundation. So we see that there's a God. He's endowed us with our unalienable rights. And to say that, our founders didn't want there to be Christianity. Even Thomas Jefferson, one of the least religious founders, said this. He said, "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God?" He was saying, if we remove the idea that there is a God from the people, we won't have liberty. So I'm not here to say everyone needs to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. I'm not advocating for that as someone in the government or politician. I will never do that. As a pastor, I will say I think Jesus is calling you. I think you're going to be fulfilled and you're going to have joy and a purpose if you follow the Lord and surrender your life to him. But from a government's perspective, I want you to be able to worship however you want to worship. But I also know that those foundations of liberty come from the scriptures. Even the father of the U.S. Constitution himself, James Madison, he pulled the three branches of government and the inspiration for that from Isaiah 33:22, where it says, "The Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our judge, and the Lord is our king." The legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. So you can't say that these guys did not believe that Christianity should not be the basis of our nation, because they most certainly did.
No, actually, you're missing 2 points. One is history. Actually, they didn't. And they were very careful about that. They did not want to have, a lot of them were deists. Madison,
Two.
I'm sorry?
Two of them were. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin.
No, Micah, no. Now
if you read and even Benjamin Franklin, at the end of his life, you could make the argument that he accepted Christ as his savior. What he was writing at the end of his life, I think he understood that there was a Lord and there was a God. So,
and even W.C. Fields, the day before he died, somebody looked in his hospital room and said, "Bill, you're reading the Bible. You're converting now from atheism?" And he said, "No, I'm looking for a loophole." He didn't convert. What somebody does at the end of their life is irrelevant compared to what they were doing during the Constitutional Convention. And when you had people who were, Holmes, I think, is the author of the Face of Our Founders, writes about, he was a professor of theology at William and Mary. He says, look at what they professed or said, but then look at how they behaved. One example is George Washington. Washington was a deist. He refused to take communion. He would not do that. One person who said, "I can say for a fact that George Washington is not a Christian," was the minister at the church where he attended services every week with his wife, because his wife was very devout. And that was a common thing then. The church was a social thing, as it is for people here today. But the second thing that's crucial is, not only do you look at, that wasn't the case of those 55 people who are the framers, not the founders. The founders includes everybody, not just those people who were there. But we've changed today, because today we've got as diverse a population as they had then, but people are giving voice to how they believe. And what you believe in terms of the involvement of religion in the government, even other Christians don't agree with, Micah. And so your view on it, where I respect your personal, you have a right to have a personal view on that. But then to also impute to me the inability to be moral because I don't believe in God, that I find offensive.
No, I'm not saying that you don't have the ability to be moral. I'm saying your morality is rooted in something, and your morality is taught to you by something or by someone. Morality is a thing that we learn as human beings, and it's got to come from somewhere. And we legislate morality. And so, going to your point of George Washington not being a Christian, I think that's irrelevant. I'm not here to advocate for George Washington's faith, but I do know that George Washington stood up at his inauguration, and he said, "America, his first inauguration in 1789, he said, "America, if you turn from heaven's ordained ways of right and wrong, we will not have the propitious smiles of heaven." Basically saying, if we turn away from what heaven says is right and wrong, we will not have the prosperity or the blessings that heaven itself gives. So how can you say a man who doesn't want, really honestly, one of the greatest Americans to ever live, the father of our nation, George Washington, how can you say he didn't want Christianity to be the foundation of our nation when he stands up on his inauguration? He says, if we ever turn from heaven's ordained ways of right and wrong, we're not going to survive.
Because that was the deist concept of a natural God. And you mix two things, by the way, when you talk about natural law and common law, those are two distinctly different things. We have a common law but that's a court thing, but we're talking about law. But going to Washington and talking about God, the idea of a natural God, a God of providence, a God of everything, was a deist concept. So that's not, for him to invoke God does not mean that he invoked the God of the Bible, as you would infer on that. That is not the same thing.
So you're trying to make the argument that George Washington wasn't invoking the God of the Bible.
That's right.
I think that's a pretty far stretch, because at the time Christianity was the only religion in the early colonies. I mean, that's what it was.
You're missing the whole thing. There were thousands and thousands of people out there in religion.
Not from the Pilgrims, the people who founded, who settled here in the 1600s. It was the Pilgrims. They established Christianity as the religion of our nation. So to say that George Washington was advocating for some other religion, I think is just totally missing history. I would say you don't know history. He may not have been a follower of Jesus, and we could argue that all day long. But he's not advocating for a different set of moral rules to follow and laws to follow than that of the Bible.
No, he's dealing with the concept of a natural God, which a general concept. He wasn't trying to invoke the God of the Bible, because people who were deists had a concept of God in nature and God in everything. The second thing is, though, there were people living here when Europeans arrived. This wasn't just a giant wilderness. Europeans didn't really penetrate from the coast here for about 100 years, because the people who are indigenous here, that we later kind of like killed a whole bunch of, thought we were rather peculiar, Europeans, when we got here. They had religions too. And by the time the framers met, because that's different from the founders includes everybody. By the time the framers met, that was something that they didn't consider any of these other people. And today, we have those other religions to consider. And those other religions are a panoply of religions. And not only that, there are people who don't have religions, who would view people who have religions, who would view Christians as following a belief pattern. There's been the cause of more death and suffering than any other belief system in history. Look at the Reformation. Look at other persecutions, the Spanish Inquisition. Those are things that were done in the name of Christianity. And so there's a panoply of views in terms of morality and beliefs. And it's not rooted just in Christianity.
Well, and I would argue that we as a nation have seen the prosperity and the success that we've seen, the exceptionalism, American exceptionalism that de Tocqueville was talking about, has come, and he even writes about it in Democracy in America, about our faith and the foundations of our history, the foundations that come from Judeo-Christian value systems. And so again, I'm not advocating that you have to be a Jesus follower. That's not what I'm saying. But at some point, if we get rid of the foundations of the Judeo-Christian values from our culture and from our government, then where do the morals come from? Where do the morals come from? And I want to kind of move to this idea of separation of church and state, if we can, John. I don't want to run out of time before we talk about that. But do you realize that term actually comes from a 3-paragraph letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1803 to a Danbury Baptist pastor, a Danbury, Connecticut Baptist pastor, and he was basically making the argument. He was saying, you don't have to worry about the government coming in and telling you what to do. There's a wall of separation of church and state. It was nowhere in our founding documents, separation of church and state. It came from a guy named Hugo Black, who was a justice. He was a Supreme Court justice in the 40s. And he was a member of the KKK, and he hated Catholics. He was going after Catholics. He was going after other people, other faiths, other nationalities, because he was a racist. And the modern father of the Establishment Clause is a KKK racist. So the separation of church and state that he said we needed was put into place really in 1947 is when it became what we know today as separation of church and state. It was never what our founders intended. It was never what they had. Even the deists knew that our morality had to be based in the Judeo-Christian ethic, or else we were not going to have liberty and justice for all.
I see the wheels turning
Okay,
there, and
a couple of things on history you got wrong there, Micah. I'm sorry, John. A couple of things you got wrong there, Micah. One, Thomas Jefferson didn't originate separation wall.
No, I know. It was Montesquieu. Montesquieu said it years earlier.
No. It was Roger. Wait, let me finish. Roger Williams came up with that in the 1600s. He founded Rhode Island.
Before that, it was a philosopher. It was Montesquieu.
And Jefferson was not a framer. He didn't write the Constitution. But also, if you're going to do an argument,
he was one of our founding fathers.
You can find it in Jefferson. Yeah, well, okay, but see, we had founders that were other than just fathers. Jefferson can be found for a quote on anything. Freedom, he owned slaves. He rewrote the Bible, his own version of the Bible, and was ridiculed by people in the church at the time. So he's not really a good person to cite on that. When you come to the modern day, when people are arguing why we should be free of religious oversight and there should be separation, it's like, where do you think the church should intrude? Because I've asked you, how do you think that the church, the wall breaks down, where does the church come in? Do we pay for schools all of a sudden? We're paying for parochial schools. And by the way, Hugo Black recanted being in the KKK, and he asked for forgiveness. But where does that wall break down?
But Thomas Jefferson is a terrible racist. Okay, yeah, okay.
So no, I'm saying Jefferson's a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite.
Hey, I'm not. Hey, I'm just saying it's funny. I think you're defending a KKK member, and yet you want to throw our founding fathers under the bus for owning slaves. And some of them treated their slaves better than their own children. And slavery they knew what they were doing when
And Black was not a KKK member at the time. When he was young, he was. He wrote voluminously about how badly he felt for that. There are others that stood up with him and voted with him for a majority on the court to say there is a separation of church and state. And most importantly, Micah, the overwhelming majority of people today want separation of church and state. The moral majority was neither. And people have gotten sick of seeing things like billions of dollars going towards, or tens of millions here in Indiana, hundreds, going into parochial schools and going to religious education from public funds, which specifically is in violation of Indiana's Constitution.
So let me ask you a question.
No support for religious institutions.
Well, I guess you have a real issue with money going to subsidize Christian education. But what's wrong with Christian education? I look at Christian education, I say, wow, there's discipline, there's character building, there's integrity, we have rules, kids can't break the rules. We're teaching them the 10 Commandments. Oh man, like don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Like, why are those
No, wait. A jealous God, you have no other gods before me. You can't, the Sabbath will be holy. Those are things that aren't necessarily good, Micah. And we can have them secular wise. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. The adultery thing, hey, that's something a lot of people deal with. But when you're looking at where we teach kids that, take your kids to Sunday school. Take them to church services during the regular week if you want to. But here's the problem that I have with education. Religion gets an education like we've seen from what you kind of poo-pooed last spring on COVID. When you have people who don't believe in evolution, it's only a theory, then you have a problem with people understanding science. They blow it off. And so a lot of people don't understand, like COVID actually evolves around the vaccines that we have. And that's why you try to get it early. So it kind of suppresses that. So you don't have a whole bunch of variants on that. And that's where religion starts retarding advancement of knowledge. And that's why if you want to support private religious education, you can, but not on the public dollar.
Do you want to sit here on the show and actually try to defend public education over Christian and private education today? Because I think you're going to have a hard time convincing the masses that public education is doing a better job than Christian education.
Not now, not since it's been like in so many ways crippled.
Oh,
but our public education
crippled, Mark. We give 62% of our Indiana annual budget to public education. 62%. Because I hear people say, well, would they just need more money? I mean, how much more will be enough? 75%, 80%, 100% of our budget, of our tax dollars? I mean, there's a problem, and I don't think it's money. I think we have chipped away at the moral fabric of our culture, and that's why you see kids, they're not learning. You know, the Northwest Ordinance in the 1700s, that was the precursor to our founding documents. They said 3 things we need to teach kids in public schools was religion, morality, and knowledge. Religion, morality. So our founders who helped write the Northwest Ordinance, the religion, knowledge, and morality were the 3 things that they said we have to teach in public education. And what happened in the 40s, in the 50s, we got rid of religion. Well, guess what? Morality started following suit, and that's gone now. And now knowledge is being thrown out the window. We don't have kids that aren't even learning anything. And I would argue that it's because we have removed the very foundations of everything that made our culture and our nation great. And that is the Judeo-Christian values. And again, I'm not advocating for people to be Jesus followers. All I'm saying is the values of Judeo-Christian principles are the principles that liberty and justice for all stand on. And you remove those values and everything else good goes with it.
We were never great. This country was never great. We approached greatness. We could never be great.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
We were never great from the point. Listen to me. When the Constitution was ratified, we not only recognized slavery, we protected it. It was legal. It was
okay.
protected.
Let me explain.
Micah, let me finish. I listened to you. I didn't interrupt as much as I wanted to. We did not only recognize slavery, we protected it. And up until 1865. And you had people like Tidwell say, well, those people were for states' rights. You want to read the secession statements of the 4 states that put out secession statements before the Civil War. They were only concerned about one right, and that was the ability to exercise slavery over people. That was very clear. So from 1865, we go into the 20th century. Really, the former slaves aren't that free because in the South are being discriminated against after a short period of when they went in after the Civil War. And you also have women the whole time can't form contracts. And we're committing genocide against people who lived here before Europeans got here. You get into the 20th century, finally women can vote. That's good. Then they still really couldn't form contracts in some places. And African Americans still didn't have the right to vote, exercise a vote. When you get to 1950, and the Indians were still getting killed. We call them Indians because Europeans got here and didn't realize they weren't in India. When you get to 1954 and Brown versus Board of Education won, that's when we said separate but equal is not equal. It's inherently unequal. And we started moving against segregation. Then in the 1960s, we had the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. A Republican administration brought in the EPA. We had the country oppose a war that was undeclared in Vietnam, and we stopped that war. That's when this country started to approach being moral, when we stood up to things and said no. And I think that's a period of time that you would probably look at and say, well, that's when our morals went to hell in a basket. And I use that hell as a metaphor.
Okay, I'm going to have to shut it down now because I want to bring our other people on. It was a very good and lively discussion. And you both are my friends, and the good news is you're both still my friends.
I love you. I love you, Mark. I love you, even though I disagree with you. I love you. So,
but hey, don't go anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and bring on Jacob and Lucy. And let's see, Jacob, I think is having some camera problems. This is going to be interesting to get everybody on here. How we gonna? I'll stay right there, and let's see. Lucy's got to go over here. Jacob's got to go there. Okay, so they've been listening and commenting, and now it's their turn. Let's go ahead. We'll do this. Lucy, what is your first question, and who would it be for?
Oh, my goodness. Micah, I got to pick on you a little bit because I was raised a Mormon. I was raised in a very strict, repressive religion where I was taught that the whole point of my being born a woman was so that I could provide bodies for these spirit children that were waiting to come down. And it was my duty and the morality, to fulfill my purpose as a woman to do that. And as a result, I have 10 kids. So the brainwashing stuck. But the resentment against the oppression that I felt as a woman in that religion is still with me to this day. So I am pro-life, so I want to put that out there right away. But quite frankly, the things that you've been saying to me, or not saying to me, but saying to the general audience, Handmaid's Tale, dude. So I want to know where are you going to draw the line between what you think your morality is and what you think are societal mores and the free exercise of my own will to be free.
Yeah. Well, I want you to know that Mormonism is not Christianity. It is not it's not the foundation of our nation.
Go tell that to a few million Mormons.
No, I know they're gonna disagree with that, but
I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to agree with you that it's not, which is why I left that religion, because it is not Jesus focused. They are not Jesus followers. It is a clean living road to hell.
I agree.
But the fact of the matter is they believe that they're Christians. So you have all of these different, and this is why I refuse to claim a religion. As a libertarian, I refuse to divide God or our Creator, whether it be a he or she or sexless, because the New Testament does say that God is spirit and we must worship him in spirit and in truth, regardless of the genitals. I don't think God has a penis or a vagina. But my whole point is the things that you've been saying lend themselves for people to create different factions where everybody has their own little form of Christianity. And I think that's like super divisive.
Not if you understand true Christianity, because that's the problem.
Who says what true Christianity? Who's the arbiter?
God.
Who's the arbiter, dude?
God,
I think I'm the true
one.
Christian.
It's the truth. The truth is truth.
Which Bible? Which Bible? Which manuscript?
The founders used.
They're not here to ask.
The founders used the Bible of Christianity. They didn't use Joseph. They didn't use the Book of Mormon. They didn't use Joseph Smith. The founders did not.
Did they use the King James version?
I don't know. Probably.
That was before, dude. It was before the Rosetta Stone. We got manuscripts in caves in Qumran. Okay, and is it the Christians who worship and want to actually be Jewish? I mean, should we be circumcising everybody because of that?
Principles of liberty that come from Christianity, from the value.
No. Liberty does not come from Christianity.
If you understand the principles of liberty that come from the God of the universe, the Creator, if you understand those principles, that means you as a woman, me as a man, a Mormon, a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim. That means all of us will have freedom if you understand the truth of the Scriptures. Now, I'm not here to defend when people take the Scriptures and do stupid things based off of the Scriptures. The Scriptures, the ones that were handed down to us from generations to generations, the inerrant word of God.
Does it being old make it right? Does it being old make it right?
The foundations of Scripture were given in our Constitution. It is why we have the basis of liberty. Everything in Scripture, everything you have in God's word.
So now what you're telling me is that King James Version.
No, that's what I said.
No, wait. We didn't have the NIV. So all you people reading the New American Standard of the NIV, we didn't have that when the founders were here.
I like the New King James
Version. So you got to throw it all out.
I like the NLT, American Standard. I like the New English version. So there's a lot of good versions out there. So
and they're all versions.
I like them.
Well, I'm going to jump in here and say, boy, Lucy, you didn't waste any time.
I didn't.
On the show here. I see Mark back there smiling, but we got some technical troubles with Jacob. So I'll let you have another.
He's in the region.
Do you have?
If he's in the region, it's practically communist up there. They're cycling the internet from household to household and rationing it.
They got strings and cans together. That's what they have here. So we'll see if we can't get him back on here. But Lucy, do you have a question for Mark?
Now, let me make sure I understand it. Mark, you bill yourself as being on the left side of the GOP and Micah on the right side of the GOP?
Mark's on the left side of the left.
It's about, I don't know, my arms are really long, and that's about how far
I'm only 5'7", so probably not. And I'll just say that's one of the things that like ticks me off to no end is when people saying, oh, because you're libertarian, you're left you're left socially and you're right conservative fiscally. No, man, it's completely different. Obviously, from the stream that I put in, I disagreed more with Micah than I did with Mark. But there's still a few things that I think Mark and I would probably disagree on. And one of those would be the welfare state and public education. So, Mark, I'm going to ask you flat out. I can't remember if it was you or Micah that brought up that about 55 or 60% of the Indiana state budget for which we collect tax. Yeah. So we're collecting taxes. We're literally stealing money from the paychecks of people to deliver this substandard poor education where people don't even know what the difference is between the framers and the founders. They don't even know what the difference is between the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. People confound this constantly because the educational system that we put them through is miserable and I would say agendized. And so my question for you, Mark, is where do you stand on the abolition of public education?
I'm a product of public education. I would point out that when I came home from college during the summer from my private school, I set up my stereo in my parents' servants' quarters. So I did not go through an impoverished childhood by any chance. I recognize that I've been privileged. Through a public school, we learned civics, we learned all those things. If things have gone downhill since then, I think we need to do something to address those things in education. But we don't toss the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, let's just go to vouchers and private education. Let's look at what other countries have done. For example, if you look at other countries like Finland, which is a popular place to look at, or Hong Kong, those places look at reducing the number of students with a teacher, and they look at providing what you're going to do with a kid. The first thing that a kid needs in the day is breakfast. Then they need lunch. You have to look at income inequality that we have here in this country. So if you address those things and you give kids an equal opportunity from the get-go, and we look at some of the things we were doing right about 50 years ago, man, that makes me sound old. Then we can start to bring back public education to what it was. When we built this country, as great as it was, as all the flaws.
Wait.
As great as it was, I didn't say we were great.
No, wait a second. Here's what's blowing my mind, okay? And this is where the leftism and the wokeism comes out. What you're literally advocating for is the theft from one group of people to provide for the children of another group of people. So you're literally saying your morality is okay to steal and to take money from people's taxes as long as we're using it for a good purpose.
Christian, he wouldn't have that moral
I think my kids need Nike shoes. I don't want them wearing, Walmart shoes. So where's your morality? I mean, how about we just not steal? Let's start there. Let's not steal.
Great. Then why not? Don't use the roads.
But you're advocating for theft.
Systems. Don't use. No,
all of those things can be accomplished. All of those things can be accomplished with private dollars. We had roads. We had roads before we had a constitution. No. We had roads before we had taxes.
Why doesn't any other country do it? Why doesn't any other country do it? We had private roads here.
Why should we do what other countries do? Are we not exceptional? Why are you basing what's right on what other countries do?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead. We have Jacob back on here.
Come on, Jacob. Come on in.
I just want to put in 2 cents for myself here. I live in Mars Hill, and Mark, Stoutfield has 100% free lunch and food and breakfast. Even during COVID, they were delivering food to kids at home. So I'm just putting that out there, saying that, hey, they have at school, at least, they have a fighting chance. So, Jacob, do you have your technical? Look at the lighting on Jacob too. You really stepped it up.
Yeah, I just had a little bit of a technical issue. Just internet was just running a little crazy today. Never had something like that before, but I'm happy to be back on. Just before I kind of wade into what Lucy and Mark are talking about, I do want to kind of backtrack to say that I am mostly in alignment with Micah, because I think Micah and I would be kind of considered on the same spectrum of things, more on the conservative Republican side of things. I certainly do believe, just to state my beliefs, that this country was founded on Christian principles. my belief in terms of the separation of church and state, since that's our primary topic for tonight, is that the framers intended for us not to establish a particular church or religious institution above others. But I do believe that we were established with Christian morality, since that was what the majority of people in this country wanted. And if the majority of the people in this country did not want a more Christian nation, then I think they would have explicitly stated that. Now going on to the topic of what we're talking about with public school, private school vouchers, my perspective on that is I kind of come down kind of somewhere right between Mark and Lucy on this one. I believe in school choice, meaning that, I think there still should be public schools, but if people want to opt out of the public school system and go more towards either homeschooling, parochial school, some other sort of private school, they should have the right to take their tax dollars that are going to the public school system and put them towards, the way they want to educate their children. For me, for example, I actually was homeschooled. So if my parents would have had this benefit, it would have been tremendously helpful to our family instead of paying money for a school that we did not use.
Thank you, Jacob. That is the only right answer there, which is if you're going to steal from a group of people for the benefit of another, those who don't want to be stolen from should have a way to opt out. And I would be happy with just not even taking money from other people in the $10,000, because we're homeschooling our kids and have for a long time. I don't need your $10,000 per kid. I'm doing it for my kids on $200 or $300 a month. And they're going to have a better education than the kids who came out of a public school. Now, why is that? Morality. And by the way, John, I wanted to say to your wife, Lisa, my great-great-great-grandfather, Lemuel Mallory, was one of the men at Mountain Meadows massacres, killing people.
Wow,
Just so you know.
that is crazy. And for those that didn't see that comment, my wife Lisa's great-great-grandmother was one of the kids that was under 5 of the 121, I believe, adults that were killed. Literally killed, and then it was covered up by Brigham Young and that outfit out there, as it was Indians that killed them. So look that up. It's the first 9/11 because it was, I think,
it's the first 9/11.
Yeah,
1864,
1857, I think, is what
somewhere around there.
But yeah, so I've actually seen all that stuff because of my wife's ordeal with that.
My great-great-grandpa was a day night.
Yeah, it was a 2-day sea. It was just a big mess.
Seriously.
So let's see. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and have our guests, Mark Small and Micah Beckwith, sign off, and then we're going to talk amongst ourselves. It's going to be about you two, I'm pretty sure. So get back to the island of misfit toys and get to making some toys. I want to be a dentist. And then we're going to take on the abominable snowman come the next election, right? So I just
want to be on the conspiracy thing, though.
Yeah, well, there's so much going on here. This is the first time we've had 5 people on here. We'll get to that. And that
was a conspiracy. You had to conspire to get all of us on here at once.
Oh, yeah, it was all since Sunday afternoon, too. Isn't that just
he pays his guests really well, so it's easy.
Raise your hand if you got any money for this. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
You guys negotiate as poorly
I'm paying
as I do.
the engineer the same as you guys are getting, which is me. So, but hey, it was a great discussion, guys. I would love to have you back on again. You behaved yourselves quite well, and we'll do this again. So we shall talk to you. I'll give you each a signing off parting comment. And we'll start with, since Micah started first, Mark, you start, and then Micah.
I look forward to another chance at this excellent dialogue, even though my opponent is wrong.
Lucy, are you going to let him talk to you like that? That's just.
Hey, man, as far as I can see, I'm more on his side than yours. Actually, I'm on everybody's side as long as you don't try and violate the NAP. And I am not a pacifist. So if you try and violate the NAP my way,
spoken like a true libertarian.
I'm so libertarian. I want to own that Caterpillar bulldozer tank and make it into my own tank. That's how libertarian I am.
That's great. Well, hey, I appreciate being able to come on, John, Lucy, Jacob, Mark. It's obviously is a great conversation, and it's one that needs to be had more often. I wish more people would get engaged, and anytime people are, I love just, it doesn't matter what side you fall on the political aisle or the theology aisle. It doesn't matter to me. I just want people to get engaged and start asking questions and searching for truth. And that we all win when that happens. So,
yeah.
Yep, and that's what we try to do here, a civil conversation, and you guys were a very good example of that. And don't forget, Mouthwash, it's a minty fresh take on politics. So thank you guys, and we will catch you in the funny paper, as they say. Okay, let's get everybody to where they're supposed to go here. All right, hey, so far so good. We're sort of on schedule here, so that's amazing. So what do y'all think about that? I'll start with Jacob, since you had limited time due to technical difficulties, and I'm just impressed with your lighting and everything you have now. I love it. So
yeah, I guess I got everything all lined up in the right place. It just took a little technical problems, and hey, we got a better result out of it. But yeah, I was able to listen to the entire discussion while kind of having my technical issues. I was listening to it on Facebook. So, obviously getting the gist of it. I was really impressed with Micah's performance. Even though I disagree with Mark on most of what he had to say, I would say that he presented his argument very well as well. Kind of to restate my whole point, like I was saying earlier, I do think that there is a place for Christianity in the public sphere. Now, I'm not advocating that the United States become a theocracy or something like that. I would never do something like that. But I am saying that the moral principles that underline Christianity have brought, continue to bring, and God willing will continue to bring stability and morality to the people of this country. Christianity is the religion of over 70% of the population of the United States, and that number was even higher in the past. So I really think that Christianity does provide a stabilizing factor. But with that being said, being a constitutionalist like I am, I do not believe the founders set a precedent to have one religion over another. To kind of give a historical context to this, the reason why we treat religion very uniquely in the United States in the public sphere as opposed to other societies in the past is because of the Reformation, the Crusades, all the religious wars that happened in Europe. A lot of times this would be caused because, say, the Lutheran Church was upset at the Catholic Church, or the Anglican Church was upset at the Methodist Church. That's the reason why a lot of this stuff happened, because one church was being elevated over another by this prince or this king or that lord, and so that would oftentimes lead to wars. But if we, just simply approach it, we don't approach it in the way of establishing one church above the others. That will, respect everybody's rights to attend whatever church they want to, and will lead to not wars or dissension over religion.
Gosh,
hold on before you go,
being
Lucy.
homeschooled, I have like nothing to disagree with. Man, you're right.
Hold on before you go. You might be you're going to think this is sort of funny. This is from your husband, but don't worry, you got people that are on your side here. So look,
yeah. Shout out to my peeps. Shout out to my friend Liz out there.
Yeah. So, wait, here we go.
This is why we've been married for 30 years. He makes me
laugh. But he sounds, anybody that has been party to having 10 kids has got to be interesting, right? And that's one of the things that since we did have a left and a right, I think there's enough. Both of you are fairly conservative. But I think that we're going to be able to, as it was seen there, you were able to give Micah, a pretty good test there. And so I think this is going to be some interesting conversations going forward. But let's get into, let me throw this question out. But hold on. Before I do that, I want to show the skateboard journalist. I got this late. I wanted to show it before, but I knew folks had tuned in to see this. So this is what our peeps on the streets, what we have this for Lucy and anybody just tuning in. Thomas Breedlove, the Indianapolis skateboard journalist, he goes out and he asks peeps on the streets our question. So this question is a very tricky subject. So I'm just going to go ahead and roll this. It's about a couple minutes, and then we'll come back on. And then, Lucy, I'll let you continue on. So let's have a look at this.
What do you think about the separation between church and state?
Church and state, it's a big hoax. I argue with every preacher about it, everyone. nobody's going to hell forever while the Christians go to heaven forever. And denominational, maybe God was Jehovah, maybe he was Jesus, but at the same time, I think there's a righteous God for every religion or every race, my bad. But at the same time, if it's all based on righteousness, if you're doing what's right, why wouldn't God save you if you're not doing nothing wrong? You can't say one day, Seventh-day Adventists believe they're going to hell too, because they'll even go as far as that. They're not saved. There's no wrong like that.
How do you think the state and religion should be completely separated?
I think the states should all be together. Like one law, get 20, 30 years more for drugs in California, when here you don't, and then you go there back and forth. It's like it should be all equal. It's like in other countries, they got crooked laws and corrupt. We've all grown up around that, and they need to print the money out and save all the people. That's why I'm ashamed to be American, because they won't help all the other countries, when they print that money out. Oh, we can't print the money out, make sure it goes what it's for. Yeah, you can. IRS does. They kept track of every penny on my dollar since I was born that I spent.
I was just wondering about the state in regards to religion. Should they regulate it, or?
Freedom of religion, it should be free more. Like, you can't really know. You shouldn't regulate. You should make them, not disrespect them, but at the same time, you shouldn't have to have them go out of their way to show.
You think they should pay taxes to church?
Respect. No. Hey, tax the rich and give to the poor. That's the only thing that should do away with taxes. Taxes. Why do I have to pay to go to school? They charge the poor people when that's keeping us under, Charge the rich people when they already got it, you know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate you, Nate. Yep. Thanks for answering those questions.
Thank you.
Makes my night a little bit easier.
I got a little stage fright. I did business management. I had to do a few speeches, but I'm not really good yet. But I'll try. Next time I'll give you a better
You're all good, dude.
I'll try to give you a good one. But yeah, I'll keep an open mind about that stuff. People might want to enter. I might want to do an interview about the coronavirus. I think it's a hoax, something. Maybe other countries should try.
And there you have it, John. One very confused man's interpretation of separation of church and state. And the Indianapolis skateboard journalist.
So I think that pretty much summed up that question. He went around the bases, 5 times maybe on that. But so Thomas will be out doing the peeps on the street, and we can't. I try to get out and do it. So we pretty much have our question for the topic and do that. And I generally play it at the start of the show. But as I say, everybody wanted to hear what our guest had to say. And now they want to hear what you want to say and not me. So Lucy, take it away.
Well, I love that segment, man. I'm glad that you've got that in there. That was fantastic. I loved hearing the guys mind dump the ADD, the ADHD, and how his mind must work. It was just kind of pinging around. But there's some subtext that I heard in here that he may have said some things differently than I said it. But what he was really saying was with, the drug war, we need to just stop the war on drugs. It's expensive. We need to abolish victimless crimes. One of the things, and I'm going to pick on religion just a little bit and Christianity in particular, because I think this plays into the morality that led to the drug war. And that's the idea that there's this ideal way to be, this ideal morality, this ideal way of thinking, or an ideal state of being. Government literally believes that it has the power and the moral authority to regulate your state of happiness or unhappiness. So I'm a person that I don't smoke, I don't drink, never have, never will. Part of that's because I grew up Mormon. It was a great way to grow up from that respect. But if I were unhappy, there are people who literally believe that they have the authority at the point of the gun to keep me from ingesting a certain plant or plants, since there are multiples that are regulated, to keep me from feeling happy. I absolutely reject that notion entirely. And the idea that you can have a crime by ingesting a plant, that you can somehow commit a crime against yourself, I also reject entirely. So I don't know about you, Jacob. How do you feel about the drug war?
Well, always my premise that I say with the drug war, it's not an issue that I often debate or really think too much about. I do have my perspective on it, but it's something that doesn't. I kind of am the same as you in terms of it doesn't impact me as much because I'm not one that ingests foreign substances. Just not.
Yeah, I never have.
That's not the way that I go at it. But the way that I approach it, as I approach most social issues, is more from the perspective of a states' rights approach. I am unequivocally against the federal government coming in and regulating drugs, because not only do I disagree with it ideologically, but to be honest, it's not even practical, because there's not enough FBI agents to go out there and bust every person smoking weed or doing cocaine or something. We can see evidence of this from Prohibition in the 1920s, when literally the Department of Treasury was in charge of enforcing the Prohibition laws, and it just wasn't effective. They had like a couple hundred agents to cover the entire United States, plus the borders of Canada, plus the Gulf of Mexico. So that being said, I think it's an issue that should be decided by state legislatures and or by like referendum, having people vote on it. Personally, I'm not really in favor of drug legalization. That's kind of where I differ with libertarians on. I think it kind of opens a Pandora's box. I think by making it more accessible, it can lead to addiction becoming a little bit easier. And that's with that, you could make that argument with alcohol and with cigarettes, certainly. But I just don't think adding more substances to the list of things that are available for people legally does well. Now, when it comes to the war on drugs, the way that we've approached it has been very ineffective. It obviously has not, driven things down. But I think there really is kind of more of a nuanced approach that we could take with it. Like one of the things that I would say, for example, is decriminalizing drug users. I think drug pushers are really the ones that should be facing more of the severe penalties if drugs are to remain illegal. People that are simply using things, substances, should be treated more like with rehab and with trying to help them get off of those substances to where they're not controlling their life. They shouldn't be imprisoned for 10, 20 years for, having an addiction, for having a problem.
Yep. Hey, let's go ahead. I'm going to ask a question, and this is specifically about, you got, somebody that agreed with that. So I'm going to put that up there for you, Jacob. How about the, if you look at the Bible, let's don't look at a religion, per se. Let's look at the, some of the rules in the Bible. I once knew an attorney that church said, they called this attorney, said, write the bylaws for my church. And he simply just sent an email back. Well, the Bible has all that in it. So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about the 10 Commandments, but what about the teachings of Jesus? A lot of people don't believe that, but if you really look at how Jesus lays out how you're supposed to live, it's pretty solid. So I see Lucy over here trying to. I'll let you go first on that.
Yeah.
And you got a cat. That's not even fair. I got a blind dog I could get on the camera here if I need to. So.
Oh, and he's so demanding. He's such an attention whore. Let's talk about that, because, that brings into mind a lot of really interesting things about, should the Bible, for example, be the final arbiter of truth? And if something is not in the Bible, should we condemn it? And if something is in the Bible, should we follow it? This comes up with a lot of people know that I'm against, for example, forced infant genital mutilation, what's also known as routine infant circumcision or circumcision. And I am absolutely horrified at the number of people who are Christian who stand up and say, hey, I'm a Christian, and that's why I mutilated the genitals of my infant because my religion tells me to. But apparently they're pick and choosers of the Bible, because had they read Galatians, they would have seen that if you circumcise your child, they have to keep the whole of the law. So I think a lot of the problem is that people have this impression of what Christianity is or what Christianity says. They think that because they went to church as a child, or maybe they do now, that they actually know what the Bible says. They've never bothered to read it for themselves. My husband, who claims pretty much no religion at all, I don't want to put words into his mouth, especially since he's listening, but he can correct me in the comments if he wants. He was really offended one time when we had some friends that were Christian were playing Bible trivia. And one of them made an offhand comment about how he was, just a baby Christian, because he was the type, like George Washington, he would go to church with me because, that was the cool thing to do, right? It keeps the family together. It gives you some unity. But he had read the Bible through three complete cycles at that point in his life, which was more than the people that we were playing with. So here are these professed Christians who were starting churches, and they're evangelicals, and they didn't know the Bible as well as somebody that I would call a non-believer. So I think that's a bad part of it. I want to speak to the decriminalization, because I absolutely believe that these substances have never been criminalized in the first place. They were criminalized for profit and in order to demonize Black people. If you go back to the history of marijuana in this country, everybody used cannabis. Everybody knew about cannabis. It was widely available, but it was only when they wanted to demonize first Mexicans, and that's why they called it marijuana. And then if you go back to the racist roots of the prohibition of marijuana in this country, you discover that it was because white women were tapping their toes to the sounds of Black jazz trumpet players. I mean, this was like literally one of the things that the original head of the FDA brought up as a good reason to do that with marijuana, with cannabis. So I think we really need to look at things in a lot of context and history. I think we probably agree on way more things than we disagree. But to me, I was born a free, natural human. In my natural state, I was born with all the rights that attend to being a human. And I don't care whether I would have been born in Pakistan, China, or good old Indiana, because I'm a native Hoosier. Those rights come with being a human. It's only the accident of my birth, drawn inside these arbitrary political lines that you see on a map, that have afforded me the recognition of those rights by what we call the Constitution. So I believe that every person on earth has rights equal at birth to what I possess. So when we come along and we have people that claim to be an authority and they say, you can't smoke marijuana because I think it's bad, what you're really saying to me is that somewhere along the line, you thought that your opinion trumps my body and that you have the right to then tell me what to do. And that you have such a perceived authority that you've given yourself, or because you've gotten a gang of people together and you've all decided that this is going to be, and because there are more of you than there are of me, that you can then impose your will upon me, down to the point where you can decide whether or not I'm happy inside my own head. So I'm not going to cuss, but I'm going to say F off. Because in my natural state, I came equipped with all of this freedom, which is why I challenge each and every one of you that if you believe that you are free, that you are born with these rights, you have to stand up and claim them. And everybody that's wearing a muzzle, I'm looking at you.
No, we've had that discussion on our show, so let's we're down in the weeds a little bit off the church and state, but I think that's definitely important topic, discussion to have, and this is what's interesting, because I'm the oldest one here. Lucy, you're closer to my age, and Jacob's half my age, or a third. I don't know. Yeah, more like a third. That makes me feel really old, and I think that part of what we suffer from is the fact that these past things happened in such a different time, called a zeitgeist. It's like of the times. Now we have such communication that, look, us three are on this, semi-famous show that we've just sort of produced on our own. We're put it out there. We got, a lot of people watching this. Back in the day, we would just be out in the woods yelling at the sheep or something, So it has definitely changed. And, and the war on drugs has been going for a long time. I remember Nancy Reagan doing the war on drugs. And I think anytime the government goes on a war on something, it boosts it. It's like, from a younger person's perspective, how do you think that, how did we get to this point where, the people think that the government can tell us how we're supposed to live, and it just seems like we just get more infringing laws and rules and type of things. So that'd be a really good one for.
I can tell you the origin of all of this. And
I know, but it's not your turn. It's not your turn. It's Jacob's turn.
Take your soliloquy, man. I'll hold back.
We'll get thrown off the show on your first thing, okay? That's a
well, and what I'll say, John, is kind of, I'm not, like what I prefaced earlier in the conversation when it comes to the drug issue, I don't really have an entrenched opinion on this issue one way or the other. I tend to lean more towards it being criminalized, but I'm open to other options. The thing that I'm very much against, this is kind of my parameter, is I don't want us just legalizing all drugs, opening the floodgates, and just simply saying, have at it. Because I think that anybody, with basic, common sense would recognize that heroin, methamphetamines, the harder drugs can cause a lot of, cognitive and physical issues for people. So if we were to legalize it, which once again, if it's done at the state and local level, The only way that I could really get behind that is if there is kind of a societal discouragement of using these substances. And the best analogy that I can give for what I'd like to see is like with cigarettes. So cigarettes are legal. You know, you can go out there, you can buy them from your local gas station, you can pretty much smoke them wherever, as long as it's not in a business establishment. It's not a bar in the state of Indiana. But what you see throughout not just our state, but throughout the country, is a discouragement of people picking up smoking. Like, I mean, for myself, when I was a teenager, I used to smoke cigarettes occasionally. And people would see that and they would just say, oh, you should stop smoking, stop smoking, stop smoking. And I'm glad that people said that to me, because smoking is harmful for your body, for your physical health. It leads to cancer. And that's the same thing with a lot of these drugs. So if these drugs were to be legalized, I would say that we should, as a society, not just the government, but, you know, the society at large, churches, businesses, should be discouraging people from doing this and not creating a drug culture. That's the thing that I'm trying to prevent against, is not necessarily the criminalization or decriminalization, but rather the creation of a drug culture. That's the main thing that I have an issue with. But I do want to kind of circle back for a second just to tie this in with the separation of church and state argument. We were talking about the Bible earlier, and kind of like, you know, people saying, oh, well, you know, my church's dogma is the scriptures. Well, that's kind of an ignorant thing to say. No offense to whoever says that. But the thing is how all these churches got created was from different interpretations of the Holy Scriptures. And, you know, all the churches, the Lutherans, the Catholics, the Orthodox, the Anglicans, they all say they believe in the Holy Scriptures, but they have a different interpretation of it. So simply saying, oh, I just follow the Scriptures. Well, no, you're following your interpretation of the Scriptures. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that I just wanted to slip that point in there.
And I think that is, you hit the nail right on the head about how it is interpreted. It's like what they say, perception's 9/10 of the law, and how people interpret these things, and even Jesus tried to simplify it, you know, and he would tell parables and stories to go with these rules and laws to explain it better, and really not to single any certain person out. So you would put your person in that thing. So, and I did see from Dorn there, Lucy, that he won the Bible trivia. By the way, he was. Yeah, I won that one. I got him. So I got to meet this guy. He sounds interesting. So I don't know if I want to do any Bible trivia against him, though. Whew,
you'll lose.
But in honestly, though, you know, folks that read the Bible, or, you know, a lot of people will comment on religion or whatever, and they've never really read it. You know, hats off to your husband for reading it 3 times and trying to figure it out. And I tell you, there's a lot of words in the Bible, and there's a lot of things that you can derive from it. So let's see. I'm going to give you one more question. So do you think that our country is going to lean more towards having more of a religious type of renaissance, so to speak, or do you think we're going to continue to sort of push religion out? I will let Jacob go first. Oh, wait, Lucy, you go, and then Jacob, and then that'll be our last question for tonight on the church and state. And it's been good. So go ahead, Lucy.
I think what we're seeing right now is super simple. The Renaissance is not religion, it is communism. It is the absence of religion, and it is the godless state. And that is what you should be most afraid of. Because whether you believe in Buddha, Allah, Jesus, Krishna, all of those beliefs come with them at its heart, at their hearts, with this idea of the golden rule, of treating others the way that you would want to be treated, and not aggressing against people because of that sense of religion, that honoring the God that you worship comes along with respecting his creation, even as individual human beings. Whereas where we're moving right now is communism. And that communism has been instilled through the propaganda that masquerades as curriculum in our public schools, to where people have removed themselves from a belief in God and the indoctrination of young people to not believe in God. And, you know, I'm here as a person that I claim no religion because I don't want people to divide the creator along party lines and have me be a part of that. I was never a person that once I became an adult would ever join a church, because I don't want somebody to bring me religion in a box and say, hey, here's the binder full of beliefs. This is the name on the door and you got to believe everything in here. Not at all. Freedom and individual liberty are too precious for me. So what I would call for people to do is to, if you want to believe in God, wonderful. I support you in that. I will worship alongside you. But we all must be in this together against the common enemy. Stop being divided. See the communism. That's the enemy.
Yep, well said. I agree. I think that there's a lot of things tugging and pulling and pushing and fighting for control.
And yes, churches are infiltrated. Yes, they are.
Well, church attendance is under 50% for the first time in a long time, probably, maybe ever. I don't know. So, Jacob, what say you?
Well, speaking to the point about churches being infiltrated, what's very interesting is how Lucy mentioned communism. My grandmother, for perspective's sake, actually came from a communist country. She came from Yugoslavia. So I know all about communism from a firsthand example, and have really grown to despise what it all stands for. And I will say that in communist countries, they actually would infiltrate the church. That's very true. What they would actually do is they would the party would take one of their operatives and would pay for their education to go to seminary for 4 to 6 years, and then have them ordained a priest, pastor, bishop, whatever, and use it as a way to actually undermine people's faith, from the inside out. So certainly big government is infiltrating churches, and they're especially infiltrating schools, especially universities. Like you look at a university like, say, Notre Dame or Loyola or St. Xavier, they've become a lot more liberal in their curriculum because they're getting this money from the government. They're being subsidized, and then that kind of has strings attached. It's like, okay, well, you're going to get this money, and then kind of somewhere in the details, it might not be explicitly stated, but it's implicitly implied that, well, you need to kind of go along with the woke culture, quote unquote. So yes, our big problem we have is communism and how it's being infiltrated to us through big government and through woke corporations. So I'm totally in agreement with Lucy on that. Now, the main question that you asked before, John, was whether we're going to become a more religious country or a less religious country. To be honest, I can't give you a definitive yes or no to that, because I think in many ways, and I think everybody in the audience would agree with me on this one, is that we are at a crossroads for this country. I think the two sides are more polarized than ever. And I think we're kind of almost trying to find our identity as a nation. It almost feels like we're divided into two nations, blue America and red America, and then just different varieties of blue and red. I would say that libertarianism kind of leans a little bit more towards the right, even though it is kind of on the left in some ways. But you got different varieties of that, but it's pretty much two camps, left and right, and they just don't really have much in common. So in regards to religion, I think the people on the right, generally speaking, are probably going to move further towards religion, whereas people on the left are going to become even more anti-religion, because people on the left are drifting towards communism, which is always anti-religion. It's not, the Democrat Party today is not the Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy, where you can be a good Catholic and be a Democrat. So that's basically my thoughts on it. I think that some people in this country are going to move way closer to religion, and others are going to move way further away. And where the country goes, yeah, and where the country goes is going to be which one of those two factions wins.
The bridge that will get there is the religion of science. It's scientism, and the belief that there is something that is infallible that can be measured. So those of you that are saying it's all about the science, whose science? Who's being paid to produce that science?
It's all about interpretation.
Science is always changing, Lucy. I mean, it's always evolving. Right. I mean, 500 years ago, we thought the Earth was flat. We don't think that anymore, except maybe a small little subset of people think that. But the established science has changed, dramatically in the last 500 years. It can change in the next, 2 to 3 years. So you can't worship science. Science is not a god, as much as people
unfortunately they do. And unfortunately, people are disconnected from the profit motive that is science, and they don't understand how the lobbying process works, and they don't understand that, the third leading cause of death in this country is actually doctor error, iatrogenesis. And so if people could just step back and really have some way to reason and have common sense, but of course we can't, because it was beaten out of us in public schools. And Nicole is right. Science is bought and paid for. 97% of the scientists agree with those who fund them.
Yeah, and here's what your husband thinks about the earth. So
I think that is like some sort of insult or allusion to my lack of culinary skills. We're gonna have a talk about that later, honey.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have a few words with him. Well, and one of the things that coming into this, I'm gonna put my 2 cents in. I lied about you guys getting the last word. Is when you read from Solomon and the generations after that, and you talk about just crappy leaders, Manasseh, just evil, child killing people, and then you see what happens. So and it always starts out with they turn their ways from God. They worship Baal. They didn't do this, and it never turned out. So it's all about interpretation of what you think. And you said it earlier, Lucy. We're all in this together, and I'm going to breathe a sigh of relief. We made it through these discussions tonight. We've had a lot of new things on the show, and it's been really, really good. And we are going to call it a day. And it's all been good. Reminder to everyone: next week we will be 9 p.m. I don't even know if we know what the topic is yet, but we'll have it and we'll get it out there. And I just appreciate everybody tuning in for this show. And hey, stay tuned. We'll have some more fabulous guests, and we'll talk about other things. And hey, don't forget, I'm going to put one banner up here that we do have this voicemail that you can leave a voicemail, and we'll play it on the air. Unless it's crazy. Unless it's that guy that was answering the skateboard journalist. I don't think we got enough airtime for that. But leave a voicemail if you have a question, whatever. If you want to make a comment about whatever, put it on there, and we'll monitor that. But otherwise, I'll let you say bye, Lucy.
Bye.
And I'll let you say bye, Jacob.
See you later, folks.
And I say peace out.